The grand chamber of the Galactic Council stretched endlessly, its towering pillars carved from the remains of dead stars. The air hummed with the presence of ancient civilizations, their emissaries seated in a crescent formation around a single lonely figure, the human ambassador, Dr. Elias Carter. He stood at the center, surrounded by some of the oldest and most powerful species in the known universe. Each of them had ruled the stars long before humanity had even discovered fire. To them, humans were nothing more than children playing at war, a species of fleeting importance, and today was the day they would make that very clear. The High Chancellor of the HFY, a towering crystalline being whose body shimmered with every movement, leaned forward, its voice echoing across the hall. Humans, a race without history, without legacy. You seek to claim a seat among the mighty, yet you bring nothing but the arrogance of youth. What right do you have to stand before us? A low murmur spread through the chamber, followed by quiet laughter from the other delegations. The Krelak, an insectoid species with a reputation for unmatched intellect, shittered amongst themselves. The reptilian Vorthan warriors seated in heavy armor smirked in amusement. Even the normally neutral Zalari, known for their wisdom, cast doubtful glances toward the lone human representative. Dr. Carter, however, remained calm. He had expected this. Humanity had fought tooth and nail to reach the stars, had endured war, famine, and endless struggles to stand here today, but none of that mattered to the Council. To them, strength was measured in millennia, not mere centuries. They saw humans as newcomers, unworthy of true galactic influence. But they had no idea what was about to unfold. Carter took a deep breath and reached into his coat, pulling out a small, ancient tablet. The Council's laughter faded as he held it up, its surface inscribed with symbols that no one in the room recognized. Even the Krelak scholars, known for preserving languages lost to time, suddenly fell silent. The High Chancellor's shimmering form stiffened. "What is that?" Carter's lips curled into a knowing smile. "An answer to your question." Then he began to speak. His voice carried words long forgotten, syllables that no human throat should have been able to form, yet they flowed effortlessly from his mouth. The air grew heavy as the sound filled the chamber, echoing against the cold metallic walls. The laughter was gone now. The murmurs turned to stunned silence. The Krelak scholars frantically accessed their databases, scanning for any match, only to find nothing. The Vorthan warriors, normally so confident, exchanged uneasy glances. And the HFY, they sat frozen, their crystalline bodies dimming as if a terrible truth had just been revealed. The High Chancellor's voice, once dripping with arrogance, now trembled. That language. It stopped, as if saying the next words would shatter the very foundation of their beliefs. But Carter finished the sentence for him. The language of the firstborn. A shockwave of disbelief rippled through the chamber. The firstborn were a legend, a civilization so old that even the longest-lived species considered them nothing more than myth. They were said to have ruled the stars before the first empires had risen, before the great wars that shaped the modern galaxy. And yet, their existence had always been a mystery until now. The Krelak scholar general's mandibles clicked rapidly in distress. Impossible! That language has not been spoken in over 100 millennia. Carter stepped forward, his gaze steady. And yet, here I am speaking it. The silence in the room was suffocating. The Council, once so certain of humanity's insignificance, now found themselves standing at the edge of a revelation that could change everything. The implications were too great to ignore. If humanity could speak the dead language of the firstborn, if they had preserved knowledge that not even the most ancient species remembered, then what else did they know? What other secrets lay buried in their past? The High Chancellor of the HFY, who had once mocked humanity, now looked at Carter with something bordering on fear. What are you claiming? Carter let the moment stretch, allowing the weight of his words to sink in before delivering his final answer. That humanity is not just another species clawing its way into the stars. We are something far older. Something forgotten. Something that was never meant to return. The council chamber, once filled with scorn and laughter, now sat in absolute silence. And for the first time in their long, endless rule, The mighty rulers of the galaxy felt afraid. The air inside the Galactic Council chamber was heavy with silence. A silence so deep, so absolute, that it crushed the arrogance that had once filled the room. Moments ago, the most powerful species in the galaxy had mocked humanity, laughing at their supposed insignificance. But now they sat frozen, their eyes locked on Dr. Elias Carter, the human ambassador who had just spoken the language of the firstborn, a language that should have been long dead. The chamber, a place that had witnessed the rise and fall of empires, had never felt such unease. The HFY delegation, once proud and dismissive, now looked as if they had seen a ghost. The Krelak scholars, known for their vast knowledge of history, had turned pale, their many limbs trembling. Even the mighty Vorthan warriors, who had fought countless wars, seemed uneasy, their clawed hands tightening around the hilts of their ceremonial weapons. No one knew how to respond. Carter remained standing in the center, his expression calm, his presence now carrying an unseen weight. He could feel their fear, their disbelief, and beneath it all, their growing realization. These beings, some of whom had ruled for tens of thousands of years, had always believed that the firstborn were nothing more than legends. Their supposed remains had turned to dust before even the oldest species had crawled out of their primordial swamps. The very idea that a living species, one as young as humanity, could still carry their language, their knowledge, was unthinkable. And yet, Carter had spoken it. Not from a translation device, not from an ancient recording, but from memory. The weight of history pressed down on the chamber, and Carter knew that the moment he had been waiting for had arrived. The High Chancellor of the HFY was the first to break the silence. His crystalline body, which once glowed with confidence, had dimmed. This is impossible. No species can speak that tongue. It has been lost for more than 100,000 years. His voice wavered, as if he were trying to convince himself more than anyone else. Where did you learn it? Carter stepped forward, his footsteps echoing in the vast chamber. He reached into his coat and pulled out a small, ancient tablet, the same one he had presented before. But now, it was no longer just an artifact, it was evidence. The inscriptions on it were unreadable to everyone in the room, even to the oldest scholars, but not to Carter. He traced a finger over the symbols, his voice calm but firm. You call us a young race. You say we have no history. But the truth is, our history is older than yours. We did not learn this language from another species. We uncovered it beneath our own soil. A collective shudder ran through the chamber. The Krelak scholar general, who had spent his entire life deciphering ancient texts, leaned forward, his mandibles clicking in agitation. Are you saying this language existed on your world? Carter nodded. Yes. And not just a few scattered words. Entire texts. Carvings. Ruins buried beneath layers of time. For centuries, we thought they were the remnants of an unknown civilization, something that predated our recorded history. But then, as we advanced, as we learned more about the galaxy, we started finding connections. He looked around the chamber, meeting the eyes of every delegation. Connections to all of you. The words sent a ripple of unease through the room. Carter could see it now, the slow realization creeping into their minds. If humanity had uncovered a language older than any known empire, a language that not even the oldest species could read, then what did that mean about their true origins? The HFY, once the self-proclaimed oldest empire in the galaxy, seemed especially disturbed. Their High Chancellor's crystalline form flickered erratically, his voice struggling to maintain composure. You expect us to believe that humans, mere children in the cosmos, are linked to the firstborn? That you carry their knowledge? Carter held his ground. Believe what you will, Chancellor. But I have spoken their words. I have read their texts. And I am not the only one. He tapped on his wrist communicator, and within moments, a holographic display appeared above the chamber. Images filled the space: human excavation sites, ancient ruins, genetic analysis reports, linguistic comparisons. Each one telling the same story. A story that none of the assembled species had ever imagined. The Krelak scholar general's multiple eyes darted across the information, his mind racing. This is undeniable. The structure of the inscriptions matches those found in the deepest ruins of the Dead Worlds. But those ruins predate even our existence. His antennae twitched in disbelief. If this is true, if humans have retained the knowledge of the Firstborn, then that would mean the weight of his unfinished sentence hung in the air. Carter let them arrive at the conclusion themselves. It was always more powerful that way. Humanity was not just another rising species. They were something far older. A remnant. A survivor of something lost to time. The High Chancellor of the Excelvar was no longer sitting. He had risen from his throne-like seat, his crystalline form shifting erratically as he tried to process the implications. "What do you want?" His voice, once so full of superiority, now carried something far different. Fear. Carter tilted his head slightly, letting the silence stretch before answering. "What humanity has always wanted. Respect." His voice was even controlled, but the message behind it was clear. Humanity was no longer a species to be dismissed. They had unearthed something that could change the balance of power in the galaxy, and now the mighty rulers of the stars had no choice but to acknowledge them. As Carter deactivated the hologram and turned to leave, he spoke once more, this time in the ancient tongue of the Firstborn. The words carried an undeniable authority, resonating through the chamber like an echo of the past. Few could understand the meaning, but they all felt it. "We remember. And now, so will you." And with that, humanity's place in history was no longer a question. It was a reality. The ruins lay deep beneath the surface of an uncharted world, hidden beneath layers of dust and stone, untouched for thousands, perhaps even millions of years. Dr. Alan Reeves, a leading xenoarchaeologist from Earth, stood in the dim glow of his helmet light, staring at the ancient carvings on the walls. His breath was slow, controlled, but his heart pounded in his chest. This place was not supposed to exist. The records of every known civilization had no mention of it. And yet, here it was, a structure so vast, so complex, that it defied everything humanity had believed about their place in the galaxy. His team had spent months excavating this site, believing it to be just another relic of a long-forgotten alien race. But what they had discovered was far more than that. The symbols on the walls. They were not alien. They were human. Reeves stepped forward, tracing a gloved hand over the inscriptions. His team had found similar markings on Earth, deep beneath its oldest ruins, but those had always been dismissed as anomalies, unexplained, but insignificant. Now, with the same language carved into stone light years away from humanity's homeworld, the truth could no longer be ignored. He activated his communicator, his voice steady but tense. "Mission Control, this is Dr. Reeves. We found something. Something impossible." There was static for a moment before the voice of Commander Harris crackled through the earpiece. "Impossible how?" Reeves hesitated. He knew how this would sound, but there was no other way to say it. "This site. It's human, and it's older than anything we've ever found on Earth." Silence stretched between them. Then Harris's voice returned, quieter this time. "Repeat that, Doctor." Reeves turned back to the symbols, his mind racing. If humanity had existed beyond Earth before recorded history, then everything they knew about their own past was a lie. He took a deep breath. Humanity was here before history even began. The implications sent a shiver through him. How had they reached this place? What had happened to them? And more importantly, why had this truth been buried? His thoughts were interrupted as one of his team members, Dr. Elise Monroe, called out from deeper within the ruins. "Alan, you need to see this." Reeves hurried through the crumbling corridor, his footsteps echoing in the vast emptiness. When he reached her, he felt his breath catch. Monroe stood before a massive door, its surface adorned with carvings depicting humans alongside creatures that did not exist in any known records. Great machines towered over cities, figures in armor wielded weapons unlike anything humanity had ever developed, and in the center of it all, a symbol, one that matched the earliest markings found on Earth's most ancient sites. Monroe's voice was barely a whisper. "This isn't just a ruin, it's a message." Reeves stepped closer, brushing away the dust covering the lower part of the door. More symbols, more stories carved into stone, and then a warning. He didn't need a translator to understand it. The images were clear. The humans who had lived here had vanished, and whatever had caused their disappearance had been powerful enough to erase them from history. But why? And who or what had tried so hard to bury the truth? Monroe activated her scanner, analyzing the door's structure. It's sealed with a material not found anywhere in the known galaxy. Whatever is behind this door, it hasn't been touched in millennia. Reeves hesitated. A part of him knew they should report this first, but another part, the part that had dedicated his entire life to uncovering lost truths, knew they couldn't walk away without knowing. He exhaled and gave a single nod. "Open it." The team worked quickly, cutting through the ancient seal. The moment the door cracked open, a deep hum resonated through the ruins, as if the very air had been holding its breath. Reeves stepped inside first, his flashlight sweeping over a vast chamber lined with stone tablets and towering structures of unknown purpose. In the center of the room stood a pedestal. Upon it rested a single object, a sphere pulsing faintly with an eerie blue light. Not technology. Not metal. Something else. As Reeves reached for it, the hum grew louder. Monroe's voice rose in alarm. "Alan, wait!" But it was too late. His fingers brushed the sphere, and instantly, the room came to life. Symbols on the walls lit up, the carvings shifting, rearranging themselves into something new. Then, a voice, not a recording, not a transmission. It spoke in a language Reeves had never heard, yet somehow he understood every word. "You were never meant to find this." A cold dread settled over him. The voice was not angry, nor was it welcoming. It was ancient, watching, waiting. The walls around them continued to shift, revealing more of the message a history erased, a war fought in shadows, a truth that had been hidden in time itself. Humanity had once stood among the stars, not as explorers, but as rulers, as warriors. But something had happened. Something so terrible that their entire existence had been reset, their past buried so deeply that even they had forgotten it. Reeves took a step back, his heart hammering. "Who are you?" he asked. The voice did not answer. Instead, the walls displayed their final message. A single sentence, written in the same impossible language that humanity had once spoken. "If you have found this, then the cycle begins again." The light of the sphere faded. The ruins fell silent once more. But Reeves knew nothing would ever be the same again. Humanity had discovered its past. And now, the universe would remember. The Galactic Council chamber had never been so tense. The air was thick with unspoken threats as the representatives of the oldest and most powerful species sat in their elevated seats, their eyes fixed on the lone human standing before them. Admiral Ethan Graves of the Terran Defense Fleet stood tall, his gaze unwavering as he faced the assembled rulers of the galaxy. For centuries, humanity had been treated as nothing more than an upstart race, a species that had barely stepped into the stars. They had been ignored, dismissed, and, when necessary, kept in check. But today, the Council could no longer afford to ignore them. Today, the balance of power had shifted. Graves placed a small metallic cube on the table in front of him. It was unremarkable in appearance, no larger than a fist, yet the moment it touched the surface, the energy signatures in the room fluctuated. The Exilvar delegation, whose crystalline bodies thrived on energy, recoiled instinctively. The Krelak warlords, whose empire had once threatened to dominate the galaxy, leaned forward, their dark eyes narrowing. Even the Vorthan Supreme Commander, whose race had never known fear, seemed to hesitate. They all felt it, the unmistakable pulse of something powerful. Graves allowed the silence to stretch before speaking, his voice calm yet firm. 2 years ago, the Terran fleet intercepted a derelict ship on the edge of the Perseus Veil. The vessel was ancient, older than any recorded civilization. We expected ruins. Instead, we found technology that rewrote everything we knew about warfare. He tapped the cube and the room darkened as a holographic display activated above it. What they saw made even the most arrogant species in the chamber go still. Massive warships, unlike anything ever built, hovered over an unknown world, their surfaces adorned with markings that no one could read. They moved with unnatural precision, their weapons charged with an energy that no known science could explain. Then, in an instant, a single beam shot forth from one of the ships, and an entire moon shattered into dust. The room remained silent as the projection ended, the afterimage of destruction lingering in their minds. The High Chancellor of the HFY, his crystalline form flickering with agitation, was the first to speak. This is not possible. Such power does not exist. Graves allowed himself a small, knowing smile. It does now. A murmur spread through the chamber. For centuries, the Council had ensured that no single the stars above Earth shimmered like distant candles, unaware of the monumental shift taking place below. The Terran Council Hall was filled with representatives from every colony, every fleet, and every powerful institution that had shaped humanity's expansion. For the first time in history, humanity stood on the precipice of something far greater than survival. It stood on the edge of dominance. Admiral Elias Carter adjusted his uniform as he stepped onto the grand stage, his face illuminated by the holographic display that loomed behind him. The gathered officials, generals, and diplomats fell silent as his voice cut through the tension. As of this moment, the old ways are gone. The days of begging for recognition, of bowing to the so-called galactic powers, they are over. Today, a new era begins. The chamber erupted in murmurs. Some faces were grim, others were unreadable. They all knew what this meant. For centuries, humanity had struggled to be acknowledged among the older civilizations. The Galactic Council had kept them in check, treating them as little more than an ambitious but insignificant race. But everything had changed with the war. The conflict that had threatened to consume Earth and its colonies had been brutal, yet in the fires of battle, humanity had forged something unstoppable. They had shattered the fleets of their oppressors, turned their enemies' own technology against them, and emerged victorious where none had expected them to survive. Carter's hand rested on the metallic podium as he continued, his voice steady. For too long, we have fought wars that were never meant to be won. We were expected to remain weak, divided, dependent on the mercy of others. But we adapted. We built weapons they could not counter, strategies they could not predict, and alliances they never saw coming. And now, the galaxy watches, uncertain of what we will do next. The display behind him shifted, showing the aftermath of humanity's most decisive battle. Wreckage from enemy warships floated through the void, their once mighty armadas reduced to lifeless debris. The once feared Krelak warlords, whose fleets had terrorized entire systems, had been forced into retreat. The HFY, masters of diplomacy and manipulation, had been caught unprepared when humanity struck at their hidden strongholds. The old powers had underestimated Earth, and now they faced the consequences. A senator from Mars, his voice rough from years of military service, spoke up. So what now, Admiral? Do we claim vengeance? Do we turn into the monsters they feared we would become? Carter's gaze swept across the room. He knew the weight of his next words. No. We do not seek to rule through terror. We do not seek to repeat the mistakes of those who oppressed us. But make no mistake, we will never kneel again. Any power that dares to challenge our right to exist will find that we are no longer the desperate survivors they once knew. We are something far more dangerous. The silence that followed was not one of doubt, but of understanding. The old world was gone. The galaxy's balance of power had shifted, and humanity was no longer a pawn in a game played by ancient empires. They had become something new, a force that could not be ignored, a civilization that would decide its own fate. As Carter stepped away from the podium, the first of many decisions was about to be made. Would humanity extend an offer of peace, forcing the old empires to acknowledge their strength? Or would they strike first, ensuring that no enemy ever rose against them again? The choice would shape the future. But one thing was certain. The new era had begun.